Jennifer Solino. I'm a partner and a global co-chair of Sidley's product liability and mass tort practice. And Sidley is delighted to partner with the Executives Club of Chicago and World Business Chicago's 2024 Future of Foods Week to present today's conversation. Thank you for joining us in this rare opportunity to discuss today's dynamic nutrition environment and emerging concerns for American food security. Sidley is very proud of the work that we have done and will continue to do representing Bayer, including in the ongoing Roundup litigation, and I personally have been extremely proud to stand up in front of juries around the country to defend this product and this company. We at Sidley have represented Bayer for over 25 years as a client in a wide array of matters across the globe. Our current efforts on Bayer's behalf in the courtroom are just one part of the company's commitment to focusing on the science of its products, which consistently demonstrate their safety and efficacy and provide important benefits to agriculture and food security. This conversation that we are about to have will present an opportunity to explore the unique role that Bayer plays in safeguarding America and bringing food to the table. With Bill Anderson, Bayer AG's CEO, and Ambassador Ertharin Cousin, founder and CEO of Food Systems for the Future. Bill Anderson was named Bayer's CEO in June of 2023, and he brought with him at that time over 25 years of leadership experience in the life sciences industry. Bill was previously CEO of Roche Pharmaceuticals and Genentech, and he also held senior positions at Biogen and Raychem. During his time leading those companies, he was involved in the development and launch of 25 new medicines, including 15 blockbusters. He holds degrees in chemical engineering from the University of Texas and MIT, that's where he got his master's, as well as a master's degree in management from MIT's Sloan School. Fairly educated guy. And so Bill deeply understands Bayer's core mission, science for a better life. Since becoming CEO almost a year ago, Bill has brought a clear-eyed approach to the complex challenges facing the company and has streamlined its internal processes to continue bringing critical health and nutrition products to consumers. We are very grateful to have him with us today. Ambassador Ertharin Cousin founded Food Systems for the Future with the goal of ensuring that every family has access to diverse, nutritious food. From 2012 until 2017, she served as the executive director of the United Nations World Food Program, which provides direct assistance to more than 80 million people each year. Now, before that, from 2009 to 2012, she served as the U.S. ambassador to the UN Agencies for Food and Agriculture, and she was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2014. Ambassador, thank you for being with us. We encourage your participation in the discussion today. So to submit a question to the speakers, please text, we're very high tech, please text EXEC to, and here are the numbers, 22333. That's 22333, text EXEC. And if you'd like more information about today's speakers and an overview of the upcoming Executives Club programming, you can scan the QR code on the brochure at your seat for the expanded digital version of the program. Again, thank you all for being here for today's event. Ambassador and Bill, the floor is yours.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. Just a note of background on me. So I grew up in South Texas, and my wife and I began a sort of a global adventure 35 years ago this summer. We've managed to live in 6 countries, a number of cities in the U.S., but regrettably never Chicago. So, but we learned a few moves back to never say never. So maybe we'll have the privilege of spending more time in your beautiful city. I've always enjoyed visiting, and I had a lovely run this morning along the lake, and that's a unparalleled experience. So let me just get my notes here. Great. First let me just say a big thanks to the Executive Club of Chicago for the invitation. Thanks to all of you for showing up and for being interested in things that are important in the world. When people hear Bayer, they often think of their medicine cabinet, things like Bayer aspirin, one-a-day vitamins, Aleve, and we have many other brands like that you would find in the in the drugstore, in the grocery store. But what a lot of people don't realize is Bayer also is developing medicines for diseases like cancer, heart disease, Parkinson's, even actually a new medicine I was on television talking about a couple days ago. We have a new medicine for menopause, and that's actually pretty interesting topic for many people, and so you'll be hearing more about that in the months ahead. But in addition to those sort of over-the-counter medicines and then prescription medicines, another thing that Bayer does is we're the largest provider of agricultural innovation, agricultural inputs in the world. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. We've been delivering science-based innovation to people for 160 years. 160 years, how do you provide perspective on what that is? So this was just after the U.S. Civil War, but before the Great Fire in Chicago, okay? So older than this room, for example. And we've been doing that by just trying to stay up on what's scientifically important, and then how do we convert those scientific discoveries into products that improve people's lives. That's the basic formula. But today I want to focus on the agriculture part, and I'm going to touch on 3 themes, and these are the themes, okay? The first is what I'll call the agriculture understanding gap. The second is the success story of American agriculture. And then the third is promises and perils for the future of American agriculture. So let's talk about the agriculture understanding gap. It's a kind of a simple concept, okay? Here's how I would put it. If you take 100 people in America, there's probably 1 or 2 of them that's involved in providing the food for the 100, all right? Now, food is a topic that everyone has an opinion about food. Raise your hand if you have no opinions about food. Okay? So we've got, in a group of 100, we have 100 people with opinions, sometimes very strong opinions about food, and we've got 1 or 2 who are actually involved in providing food. That means there's a substantial portion of the other 98 that think that food comes from the grocery store, right? And so that actually has pretty important implications. It means this is a space where there tends to be a lot of controversy, a lot of dialogue, a lot of people talking past each other, but actually, quite frequently, there's not very much knowledge. There's more heat than light. And, sometimes that can just be comical, but at other times, it has important implications. And, agriculture was never far away from me personally, because I have relatives. I have 2 cousins and a brother-in-law that are on farms. And so, although I can't claim to be a farmer, I've spent enough time around farms that I have an idea, at least what I don't know. But it's estimated there's about 600 million farms in the world, about 2 million farms in America, there's a tremendous reliance that the rest of us have on those men and women. By the way, the majority of farmers in the world are women. Most people don't think about it that way, but the smallholder farmers in places like Africa, India, very often it's women. So there's a lot of things about farming that are kind of hidden from the rest of us who get our food from the grocery store. Food insecurity remains a challenge for millions of people in America and more than 1 billion people beyond America. And so it's an important topic. But let's move beyond the understanding gap and talk about the success story of American agriculture. You know, in my lifetime, I was going to say in our lifetimes, but I look out there and I see there's some people that are a little younger than me. So I'll just say, let's say in the last 50 years, okay, I'll be a little kind to myself. There's been tremendous gains in agriculture. American farms have tripled their output, 3 times the output, but 24% less land in use. That's pretty remarkable. And that's really important when you think that, for example, for things like climate health, it's important that we not have so much land in agriculture production because we need forests and we need, nature space. But it's also important because the population of the world has doubled in that time, more than doubled. And we had famines, as many of you recall, in the 70s and 80s that were very widespread. And today we have more than twice as many people, and we're managing to kind of keep up. We're not there, but we're a lot better off than we would have been if American farms had not tripled their output. So many of us take that for granted, but it is one of the shining accomplishments of the last century. And it's a story of sweat and calloused hands, early mornings, but it's also a story about innovation and technology. And coming into the agriculture field rather late in my career, a year ago, I've been blown away by the level of technology on farms and in the enterprises that are supplying the inputs to the farms. And we'll talk about that a little. But this is, think about it this way. The things that threaten agriculture are all around us. So we have climate change, we have droughts in many parts of the world. We have large agriculture areas and nations, places like the Central Valley in California, countries like Spain, where millions of acres are going out of production because of lack of water. The things that threaten crops, like insects, fungi, and weeds, they all evolve. They're constantly evolving, and so they're basically getting smarter than the tools that we have to control them. And so we have to invest in that. And so it's been a tremendous accomplishment. We have made tremendous gains. It's been good for American consumers. It's been good for American farmers, and it's been good for the people around the world who need food. But where do we go from here? So let me close with my third point, which is about the promises and perils for the future of agriculture in the U.S. Feeding billions more people. So we're estimating 2 billion more people by 2050, and we're going to need to do that with less stress on the environment. We're going to have less land, not more land, to do that with. We're going to have less water, and we're going to have more extreme weather. Okay? That's scary for people like Earthren and some others in this room that are focused on food security and how we do this. This is a daunting task, and it's going to require major investments in technology so that we can basically stay ahead on this. And we got to do this while we're doing things like restoring nature. All right, we need to put things back to a better state. So there are perils to this. Talked about warming climate and the need for significant production increases. These are big threats. There's another threat that is about litigation. And that's something that you've probably read something about Bayer in the newspapers about litigation. We've been exposed to billions of dollars of losses from frivolous lawsuits attacking our product Roundup, glyphosate. And that's bad for Bayer. It's been very bad for our employees, more than 10,000 of whom have lost their jobs in the last few years because of this. But it's actually, I want to say, this is actually something very serious for American agriculture. And so let me just say a few words about that. First off, glyphosate is an essential part of modern farming. It's been estimated that the cost of groceries for the average family of 4 in the US would go up by more than 40% if glyphosate was removed from the agriculture system in the US. Some of you may have seen, there was an article that ran recently in the Wall Street Journal. It showed that food prices as a percent of household income were at 11% in the 1960s, that they had dropped to 7% a few years ago. In the last 5 years, all the gains of 40 years were wiped out in a 5-year period. We're back at 11%. You've probably noticed, and you go to the grocery store, right? And everything you see, it's like, whoa, it costs that much, okay? Many of the people in this room can afford that. There's a lot of people for whom that's devastating. So this is a big issue. Second, glyphosate has been studied for 50 years. There's more than 1,000 studies, and every major country, the regulatory bodies, the scientific authorities in every major country in the world have validated the safety of glyphosate. But basically, based on one outlier analysis, our company has faced these billions of dollars of lawsuits, and it continues, okay? A second issue that's important here is about what's the purpose of all this. We're investing billions of dollars. We're the largest R&D investor in agriculture in the world. We're focused on how do we feed 2 billion more people with less land and less water. But we're actually now having to divert more resources to litigation than we spend on R&D. And so this is a threat, not just to our company, this is a threat to American farmers, it's a threat to American consumers, and it's a threat to food security for the world. So I'm a person of great optimism, okay? I believe that with the great innovators that we have in America and around the world, that we can solve the problems that we face, the environmental challenges we face, the need to provide food security for billions more people. But we have some obstacles to overcome, and look forward to working with the citizens and leaders of Chicago and how we do that in the future. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you for those remarks, Bill, and thank you again to everyone who's joined us here today. The one thing I don't think they said when you introduced me, Jennifer, is that I sit on his board, okay? So he's really, he works for me, okay? So delighted when the Executive Club team reached out to me to participate in this conversation with you today. I jumped at the opportunity because we don't get you into Chicago enough. So hopefully this isn't your last visit, and we would love to have you come more often. Bear has a lot of admirers here in the city of Chicago, and I think you found that as you've had dinner here and spent time in our city, that this is a place that welcomes you. So keep that in mind as you think about where you go from here.
Fantastic.
Let me start with a remark you made. You talked about being from South Texas, and then talked about living in 6 different countries in leadership roles. There are lots of young leaders here who are in early stages and mid-career stage. What piece of advice would you give to young American executives who are interested in multinational or global companies and working abroad?
Oh, that's a great question. First off, I have to say, that was never our game plan.
Huh.
You know, we thought, oh, maybe we'll take an assignment overseas and then we'll come back and we'll just settle down and live a normal life. And what we found was that opportunities came along, and in each case, we decided that pursuing the opportunity was worth the personal, hey, I'm just going to be frank, personal hassle. Because believe me, there's a lot of cool stuff about living in different countries, but there's a lot of hassle too. and getting new driver's licenses in foreign languages and so. But what I'll say is, we have no regrets. So what I would say is, don't keep an open mind. One specific example: when we'd been in California for about 7 years, and we were living a really nice life, and our kids were 16, 14, and 12. And an opportunity came to move to Switzerland. And we thought, there's no way. First off, you say, you never want to move your kids in high school. 2 of our kids were in high school. You don't do that, right? Isn't that right? Don't move your kids in high school. Yeah? And so I went home that night, I talked to my wife about it, and we said, well, we're not going to do this, right? But let's talk to the kids. So we told them, and one of our kids was like, yeah, let's do it, Switzerland, that sounds great. But the other 2, they were like, no way, and my daughter was going to be a senior in high school the next year, and she was like, Dad, it's my senior year, I don't want to do that. And I said, yeah, fine, I very much understand. So the next morning, I was having breakfast, and my daughter comes and sits next to me, which if you have a daughter that doesn't happen. Okay, it's like usually she's out of there, and I'm like, hey, bye, honey, and she's like, no. So she comes and sits down, and she said, Dad, if we moved to Switzerland and you took this job, would you be able to have a bigger impact on bringing new medicines to people? And I was like, whoa. I mean, you're not expecting that. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I think we should go. And so we went. And the end of the story is, all 3 of our kids would say that was one of the best opportunities they ever had to grow and learn. So whenever you have the conventional wisdom, be ready to challenge it. Because there's a lot of things about the conventional wisdom that are very mediocre.
Very mediocre is the conventional wisdom. We'll come back to that. But I would be remiss, as your daughter talked about you making a difference in medicine. You now have the opportunity to make a difference in food security for many around the world. And because as we sit here today, there's some 2.3 billion people suffering from some form of hunger, malnutrition, food insecurity, micronutrient deficiencies. 2.3 billion people, or nearly 30% of the world. And the global community came together in 2019 and hosted the UN Food System Summit and developed a pathway forward for creating the sustainable transformation of the food system to support what is necessary for environmental health, human health, as well as the financial return of all those farmers and others that you talked about across the food system. But what was surprising to me coming out and participating in that conference was 200 civil society leaders from across the globe stood up and walked out because they said there was no place for agribusiness at the table. And as you lead one of those large agribusiness companies, why do you think they're wrong? And what does agribusiness, what role should and must agribusiness play in this transformation? Yeah.
No, that's a very important question. Maybe just 2 thoughts on that. One is, it's important for people to understand who is agribusiness? If you look at the about 40,000 people at Bayer who are in our crop science division. I mean, these are agronomists. They're moms and dads. They're scientists. Many of them actually are farmers or grew up on farms, but there's quite a few actually that still have farms. And so, the image that we get from Hollywood of the, kind of the fat cats in the cigar smoke-filled rooms plotting how to exploit the earth, that doesn't really resonate if you come and spend some time at a place like Bayer Crop Science. The focus is, by the way, our mission is not just to provide more food for the world, but it's to provide more food for the world while restoring the earth. And someone might think, oh, that sounds very, high and lofty. Is it realistic? Consider that today, about 95% of row cropping in America is done with soil conservation practices, no-till farming. In fact, most large farms, I'm told now, they don't even own plows. That's a big deal. From a conventional lens, that's a big deal because when you plow up the soil, it takes a huge amount of energy. I mean, think how much energy it takes to turn over, millions of tons of land, okay? But when you plow it up and then the rains come and the winds come, you basically lose the best nutrients, and then a lot of the fertilizer things, they run into the streams, they run into the Mississippi River, to the Gulf of Mexico. So you're basically, when you stop plowing, instead of taking the carbon out of the soil, you actually have, with the plants, putting the carbon back into the soil and it stays there. So you get better soil, but you turn America's heartland into a massive carbon sink. We're trying to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Farms can do that. And we're doing that today already. But that's just one of many examples. And so people who think that somehow agribusiness has no place, they're not really paying attention to what is it that the modern companies are doing, and how does that relate to both feeding the world and restoring the planet?
So feeding the world and restoring the planet, food for all, hunger, or health for all, hunger for none, that's Bayer's vision. And it's a large company that, as you talked about, it's a health pharmaceutical company, as well as a food sciences and food and agriculture company. There's some who would say the way to get real value in a company like Bayer is to break it up. But you see an interrelationship between the pharmaceutical business and the food business, and you see an interrelationship between having these different businesses work together. How, in your opinion, do these businesses complement each other, and where is the value in keeping the company together? How do you respond to those who would say that keeping this company together is not driving shareholder value?
Yeah. Let me start to answer that by taking a poll, okay? Raise your hand if you work in a firm that has 1,000 or more employees in the world. What's that, about half? What do you think? Yeah.
2/3, yeah.
Yeah. Why do I ask that question in response to your question? So I've had an opportunity in my career to work in, the smallest firm was 30. I joined one company that's now quite large with thousands of employees, but I joined when there were 700 employees. I managed a firm of 12,000. I managed a firm of 40,000. Now I'm managing a firm that's almost 100,000. One thing I noticed along the way is there was a certain level of dynamism that was in the 30-person firm or the 700-person firm that gets lost along the way. Somewhere between, 500 and 1,000 or 2,000. You bring in the professional managers, you break up jobs into specialties, you have lots of departments, and then you have project managers who coordinate across the departments, and then you bring in a bunch of layers, you have lots of managers, and pretty soon you have a system where the people doing the work, they don't have very much control at all over how the work ought to be done, which things should be prioritized, what resources should be deployed. And so this is a long answer to your question.
Okay.
But here's what we're doing. Think of it this way. People would say, hey, split up Bayer. So we could go from being one 100,000 person firm to being whatever, 3 30,000 person firms, or do the math. Do you think that we're going to be a lot less bureaucratic when we go from 100,000 to 30,000? Does it matter if you go from 11 layers to 10 layers? Maybe you go from 1,000 rules to 800 rules, right? Is that really going to meaningfully change the dynamic for the people doing the work, the people interfacing with customers, the people who are developing new products? And I would say maybe a little, might be an improvement if we didn't have any better ideas. But we're actually doing something that's radically different than that. We're taking out many layers. We're basically putting 95% of decisions in the hands of the people doing the work, whether it's people working with farmers in the fields, whether it's the people in the labs, in the manufacturing plants, and how we're doing that is the subject of a whole nother conversation. But what I'll tell you is it's been a lot of my life's work, and it yields pretty dramatic results. And we had 50 teams operating in the new system at the end of last year. We now have over 500, and it's going to be thousands by the fall. And so really excited about that. We think that's the best use of our leadership energy and talents right now, is to create that level of dynamism for all the people of Bayer.
You know, it makes me smile when you talk about this. You talk about it as if it's really easy to do. But anyone in here who's managed a change management process inside of a large organization knows easy is not the word you start with when you're describing large change management projects like this one. So what advice would you give to leaders in this room who are facing the need for making change in their organizations?
Yeah, I would say, because I was involved in a number of corporate restructurings over a couple of decades that were the conventional type. You know, you take out a layer, you increase the span of control from 5 to 8, you have lots of nice business school buzzwords that surround the change program, and you have lots of communications, and like, if you're in a company that's doing that, hey, you got to go along with it, right? If you're a middle manager, and you're not in charge, you kind of got to do it, but it's not going to be that great, okay? It's a little secret. You know how it's not going to be that great? You know how you can know it's not going to be that great? Because big companies have to do this every 3 years, okay? If it was so great, you wouldn't be doing it again 3 years later. Okay? And the other way you know it's not great is talk to anybody who's doing the work. Talk to the people, customer-facing roles, talk to the people that are developing new products, and ask them, hey, you know that program we did with the three-letter acronym, whatever it was, the last one, you know, how did that improve your work? And they'll probably laugh if you ask them that. They're like, what are you talking about? Who said it was going to improve our work? So I would say what you have to do is, if you're going to be in the change business, make sure the thing you're changing to is worth it. And one of the things that gives us a lot of power in this transformation is that the people that are on the teams, when we set these up, they immediately see a change in the quality of the work they can do. They have an opportunity to make a difference faster, bigger, with their colleagues, and that actually fuels it.
So you're going through this change process, you're bringing all of the organization together to make it more nimble, to make it more agile, to support decision-making in the future that will help us deliver more tools to address access to nutritious food, particularly working with farmers across the globe. But I would be remiss. Jennifer talked about representing Bayer in courtrooms. You talked about the glyphosate lawsuit. The elephant in the room is the Bayer Monsanto purchase and the impact that has had on the company. All of the work that you are doing, some would say, as long as you have the litigation overhang, that you will not reach the full value of the company. You can't deliver on the new tools that you're describing. So knowing that, I'm going to be careful here, knowing that this is ongoing litigation, and so what you can say is limited, but you have been here for a year now, and you've thought a lot about this. practice. And you have 200 farmer groups out there here in the United States alone who say they need glyphosate. So how then do you see this, the litigation, the work that you're doing both inside and outside the courtroom, making a difference in this company over the short term as well as the medium term?
Yeah, well, the glyphosate litigation topic, it's an existential topic for our company because it does threaten to, first, remove our ability to continue to innovate for farmers and for food security. And, you know, that's, I promise there's no hyperbole in this. I mean, we are the largest R&D investor in agriculture in the world. By the way, there's not much R&D investment in agriculture in the world. If you look at America as an example, I mean, the US federal government spends billions and billions of dollars in subsidizing R&D in life sciences, in healthcare, every year. We have the NIH, National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute. I mean, there's so much. Agriculture, it's tiny. It's tiny. And we're playing a major role in that, but we actually are spending more money on litigation defense. I mean, billions on litigation defense and settlements every year. And so many other companies are just going out of it. For example, I mentioned that the things that attack crops, they evolve. Insects evolve, fungi evolves, weeds evolve. They develop resistance to today's crop protection products. Most companies have gone out of it. There hasn't been a new herbicide approved, a fundamentally new chemical entity approved in over 40 years in the world, all right? And so this isn't just a question about Bayer and Bayer shareholders. This is a question for America of, you know, do we have a system where despite the fact that the nation's highest authorities in science and regulatory give us the green light, but we're still subject to billions of dollars every year in lawsuits? And because this is a situation that will, be terminal for innovation in agriculture. So what we're asking for, among other things, is clarity in regulation, that if you have the EPA endorsement on safety, that you can't be held liable for not providing warnings such warnings that would be inconsistent with the EPA-approved label, because that's the situation today. I think as a nation we can rise above this and we can make progress, but we do need we need support from concerned citizens like the people in this room.
Well, and you have leaders from across Chicago who I'm sure can empathize with what you're saying about what we need for leaders to do to ensure the security of our food system here in Chicago, in the United States, as well as our food system across the globe. And this week, as you heard, the World Business Chicago is celebrating the Food Venture Summit, and you talked about the future of agriculture, and the World Business Chicago is assembling futurists, investors, and entrepreneurs contemplating the now and tomorrow of agricultural production and our food. What bold predictions would you share with us about the future of food in 5 or 10 years? How do you see us evolving to feed that 10.5 billion people that you talked about?
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to ask you the same question when I give my answer. But I'll give you one quick story and then a couple other examples. So recently I had an opportunity to taste some special pork. So I've worked in the biotechnology field for almost 30 years. In biotechnology, one of the things we do is we take cells and we genetically engineer them, and then we put them in, we call them reactors, but they're basically tanks where we feed them nutrients. And these cells, they grow and they divide and they produce some protein that we're wanting to produce. And usually that protein is a medicine. Now, that's what I spent 27 years doing. But this pork I had was pork that was produced from that same process, where the protein that was being produced and the cells that were being produced was basically pork cells. And so you could basically make meat in a factory. And then there's basically no animals involved in making meat. Now, you could probably all have debates at your tables about whether that's a good idea or not, okay? Because some people feel very strongly about it in different directions. But there's a lot of stuff going on right now, a lot of different angles as to how we feed the world in the future. A couple of things that are maybe a little less sensational, but perhaps even more revolutionary in their effect. This year in America, in Illinois, for the first time in commercial fields, we're going to be planting our newest innovation in corn. We're the world leader in corn seed production. It's called short stature corn. And basically, typical corn grows 9 or 10 feet tall, which looks great, but when you have late season storms, guess what happens? The corn plants blow over, and when the corn plant blows over, the corn is lost. And this is actually the #1 expense in the U.S. crop insurance protection program is corn lodging, corn plants blowing over. Our new corn, it grows the same corn, but the plants grow 6 feet tall instead of 9 to 10 feet tall. And basically, they are much more resistant to storms. And we test them with helicopters. You know, you basically fly a helicopter low over the conventional corn, and then you fly it over the short stature corn, and basically the conventional corn is all down, and the short stature corn, it waves, but it stands up. And so that's an example of basically technology coming to provide environmental benefit, because, by the way, if you lose 30% of your crop, you have all the inputs, the fuel use, the land use, but you get 30% less food. And so this is an immediate win. So there's a range of technologies, but we're going to need all of them.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about direct seeded rice and the reduction in methane and the reduction in water use, knowing that our food system uses about 70% of all fresh water draws on an annual basis. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so in a lot of America, we've moved rice production from conventional older techniques to sort of new techniques. But in much of Asia, they're still using the conventional where you sow the rice in small fields, and then when the plant starts to grow, they transplant that into the larger fields. And then they use water to flood the fields. And you've all seen that, but probably most people don't know why you flood the fields. Anyone know why do you flood the fields? Anyone? Weed control, that's right. And so the water is actually being used as a herbicide, which, okay, maybe that sounds good from one standpoint. It's natural, but it has a couple challenges. Use a lot of water, but also when you kill things underwater, when they rot, they don't have oxygen, then you get anaerobic fermentation. It creates methane. And this methane from production of rice is one of the largest sources of methane into the atmosphere. And methane is many times worse than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So we're basically bringing them new rice varieties that they can directly seed into the field, and they don't have to use water. So that you basically lower the labor needs, which allows the farmers to actually make a living. They can grow more rice with less labor, and you greatly reduce the methane production.
So you've described new biological tools that are coming online. We know there are new digital tools that are coming online that support our ability to farm more productively, more efficiently. The reality is that lots of these tools are based upon science like CRISPR. Where we all know CRISPR from pharmaceutical, but we don't think about CRISPR from agriculture, but that's a big piece of business for you. And so all of that is locked inside Bayer, which is why, as a large agribusiness, we're right back where we started. The role that you play is a necessary one in ensuring that we can feed 10.5 billion people. by 2050. And that we do it in a way that we're not increasing the land that's under cultivation and detrimentally impacting biodiversity. So I'm proud that I'm on your board, Bill, and I'm delighted that you're here with us today. And I think that you'll find Chicago will welcome you back at any time. So anytime you want to come back. But before you go, I know we're out of time, but you're on your way to Berlin when you leave here. What are you doing in Berlin?
Well, one of the other things, we sort of joke, we have 3 divisions, but we actually have a 4th division of Bayer that's tiny, okay? But it's called Bayer Leverkusen. Anyone heard of Bayer Leverkusen? Bayer Leverkusen is a football team, a soccer team, European football, and we actually won the Bundesliga this year, and we also set a new all-time record across all of Europe for the most games in a row without a loss. So we had 51 games in a row without a loss, and so we're playing actually on Saturday. We're playing for the German Cup, so I'm meeting my family there, and yeah, we're looking forward to that. So if any of you are soccer fans, you can also appreciate that connection. It's the same folks who are bringing you your aspirin and your Aleve and your one-a-day vitamins and a few other things. We got a little bit of soccer on the side.
So I know everyone here wants to join me in thanking you and wishing you well in your leadership of all 4 divisions of Bayer, including that Bayer Leverkusen soccer team. But most importantly, we thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, Earthman. Thank you.